This is Jay Michaels, and I'm a professor of media, culture, and communication. And I have been clocking horror and sci-fi for over 50 years. And so I'm thrilled to bring you fascinating information about this burgeoning genre for the new Boston Sci-Fi Channel. If I were to tell you that today we're going to speak to a 6-time Tony Award-winning producer, a staunch advocate of independent theater, a horror film lover for all his life, and proving it by not only producing, but writing screenplays for the genre. And currently, he's opening another horror classic on Broadway. You'd say, how many people are you going to talk to? The answer here is one. Here with us is Jim Kierstead. Jim Kierstead is a 6-time Tony Award-winning producer. His work currently now includes Hadestown and Six, and soon Sweeney Todd. And he is also a horror film lover, enough so that he's premiering a new horror movie at this point. And he's in the throes of writing a screenplay for yet another. And those were just two of many. Jim, it's great to see you again. How are you?
I'm great, Jay. It's so good to be here with you and your viewers.
Thank you. Same here. So let's start with the juicy stuff. Let's start with Summoning the Spirit. That's the new film. It's not out yet, but it's going to be out. It's just about it's ready. It's not ready for showing. They completed principal photography for it.
Yeah, Summoning the Spirit has been an incredible experience. We're my partners and I. This is our first collaboration, not our last one, but our first collaboration with a great filmmaker named John Garcia. And John has done a number of really wonderful pieces of work over the last number of years. And we got connected with him because he's just this really up and coming, terrific writer and director, and he does all the things. So because he does all the things and because he's so spectacular, it gave us this unique opportunity to be able to film this new screenplay called Summoning the Spirit. And we did it in Portland, Oregon at the end of last year. The screenplay was pretty much ready to go. John had collaborated on that with a partner over the last year or two. And we filmed it in Portland in record time. It was like about a 2-week shoot. And then John hit the ground running and he finished the edit. He's got this at the finishing houses right now for the sound and the color correction. And we've been accepted into the Miami Film Festival to be premiering in March. So it was kind of the fastest collaboration and fastest filming process I've ever seen, let alone been a part of. So yes, we're getting ready to premiere that in Miami, and we already have a distributor on board who's a partner and a friend of ours and is a master at getting things out into the world and sold. So we're looking forward to what happens with this film coming up.
That is excellent. Now, it's an interesting title, Summoning the Spirit. So you get one idea, but it's about Sasquatch. And even the legend of Sasquatch seems to be altered in this somehow. Tell us what we're going to see with Summoning the Spirit.
Absolutely. So I learned a lot about Sasquatch and Bigfoot over the last 6 months. So some of this stuff may be of interest to you guys. The legend of Bigfoot and Sasquatch, there are 2 ways the lore goes. One is Bigfoot's a big scary monster who rips people apart and tromps through the forest. The other lore, and this is the one that our film is more connected to, is that Bigfoot is a spiritual creature who looks after the forest. And, he's there to kind of protect the forest. And if anybody's doing anything, then he's going to have a problem with it and come after you. And that's basically the lore that we're using for this. It's a really interesting story about a cult that is out in the woods and they worship Bigfoot. And a young couple who's going through some difficulties in their lives want to change from the big city. So they move out and they become neighbors with this Bigfoot cult. And they quickly realize that something unusual is going on down the road from them. And that's where the story begins.
And I was reading in the release that Bigfoot's a flesh-eating creature in this, and he's savage and all of that. That's so interesting that you picked the Bigfoot we don't know. So I give you a lot of credit for taking a legend that everyone just goes, oh yeah, I saw the video where he's walking, and turning it into something really fascinating.
Yeah, this is the one type of lore, right? Because like Bigfoot doesn't just go and arbitrarily want to rip people apart. Bigfoot wants to protect the forest. So that's kind of where the danger from Bigfoot comes in, at least in this iteration. So it's kind of interesting.
I'm a big fan, and I'm writing a book called Hidden Monsters, and it talks about such things as this film, where there's a parable underneath, where it's not about the monster, it's about what the monster stands for. And I'm just by the fact you're saying that Bigfoot's protecting the forest, and I get the idea the cult is not an evil cult. It might be spoilers to tell me this, but just the notion that he's protecting the forest, I'm seeing there's other storylines underneath this.
Yeah. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that the cult is not an evil cult that wants to hurt the forest. They're actually a cult that worships Bigfoot. But the cult is filled with troubled people. I tell you that.
You don't call it a cult, but yeah.
Right. And there's a cult leader, as one would hope for, and it is like that. Yes.
Interesting. Now, so this is coming out. This is not your first horror movie. I found out. I've known you many years, but I've just found out really palpably, just like maybe 6 months ago or something like that, that you are a horror film aficionado. This is not an accident that you're producing a horror film. This is not an accident that you're writing screenplays. We're going to talk about those. And it's not an accident that Hadestown and Sweeney Todd have your name on it. Tell us about your love of horror movies.
So yes, that's all very true. So when I was growing up, I fell in love with horror, and I was probably I guess I was in junior high probably, and I'd go to my grandmother's house because my parents wouldn't let me watch like an R movie when I was like 10, but my grandmother would. So when I went over there, it was Halloween was on like HBO at that point. I missed Halloween in the movie theater, unfortunately, but Halloween ended up being like on HBO. And I remember people, being scared to death by it. And I love nothing more than that idea. So I was like, of course, as this kid, I wanted to watch Halloween. So I watched it and I was hooked. I loved Halloween. I did see Halloween 2 in the movie theater. I saw Halloween 3 in the movie theater. I saw the subsequent ones. And then from then on, with streaming and Netflix and Amazon, you can have all the horror that you want. So, I basically, to this day, I'll stay up late and watch horror movies, some better than others, but it doesn't matter. It's just about the excitement of it all. So yes, I've been a big fan of horror, and I'm a theater person, first and foremost, I would say, but I'm pretty close in the running film. So I had written about 7 years ago a psychological thriller entitled Borrowed, and it was about two guys, an older guy and a younger guy, and what happens when the older guy locks the younger guy into his house and keeps him there. And that's basically the idea of Borrowed, but that was written as a stage play. And then through a set of circumstances, some young filmmakers, not John, but these two great Cuban filmmakers from Miami, Carlos Rafael Betancourt and Oscar Ernesto Ortega, they ran into my screenplay through a partner of mine, Willie Fernandez, who lives in Miami, and they ended up wanting to turn Borrowed into a screenplay. So 2 summers ago, we filmed this show down in South Beach and in Key Largo, and that was edited and put out there. So we have a distributor for that, where we premiered that in the Miami Film Festival last year, and that did the film festival circuit over 2022. And that's with the distributor now being sold, hopefully any moment. We're just finishing up some of the captions on it, but other than that, it's all ready to rock. So that should hopefully be out in the world and available pretty soon. So the screenplay is not the same as the play. It's been adapted quite a bit, but it's another version of my play, and it's really fun for me to write that kind of work. I love getting people a little bit on the edge of their seat.
You have a new one that you're working on now, no?
I do. So it was funny because when we were working on Summoning the Spirit, our distributor had said, well, this is great. You guys are in the works with this. Like, what's your next one? And somebody casually said, well, Jim, why don't you write a horror play or a horror screenplay? And I was like, oh, yeah, I like to do that, because I had written Borrowed and I was really pleased with the way that turned out. And we did a stage production of it in Miami as well. And that seemed to be received pretty well. So I was like, oh, I would like to do that. So overnight, I thought about what the play would be, what the story would be, and I kind of came up with an idea. And literally the next day I was on the phone and they said, "Oh, Jim's going to write a horror screenplay." And they said, "Jim, why don't you tell them about what it is?" And I was like, you just talked to me about this yesterday and I came up with it last night. So I had to pitch the story within 24 hours of them mentioning that I should write this. So I said the story, I explained what the story was, and they said, "That sounds really good." They said, "When will the script be ready?" And I was like, "I haven't even like put a pen to paper yet." So I spent the next few weeks and I wrote this screenplay. I wrote a play. I wrote a play version of it that would just be on a stage. And then I adapted it with John Garcia, this guy who we did Summoning the Spirit with, this very, very talented writer and director and filmmaker. So we've been finishing up the screenplay right now, and I'm pretty pleased with it. So if everything goes as planned, we're going to go into filming probably the end of March in Miami.
What influences you in terms of ideas in writing, and also in terms of what projects, what prospects to produce? What influences you in terms of it? Is it your younger days watching all these great horror films? What makes you look at something and say, "That's the story. That's what I'm going to tell"?
It's funny. I get asked that question a lot based on like, projects I choose or plays or films or whatever. And I always have like one answer, and it's not a very exciting answer, but my answer is always like, I do things that excite me, the things that I want to see. Do you know what I mean? Like there are people a lot of times when I speak to young producers and whatnot, I'll lecture and whatnot, and people will ask that question and they'll say, like, what do you like? And I say, well, I pick things that I want to see. And they say, yeah, but like, what about things that you don't want to see? Like, there are things that might be successful or they may be received well. I said, well, yeah, sure, but there's so much material out there that I don't want to see. If I don't want to see the piece, right? And if you're doing a theater piece or a film and you don't care for it, like you have to see it so many times that I'd rather put my energy and resources into something that really excites me, something I could see over and over again, and something that I really want to hear that story. And usually if somebody gives you a quick description of what a piece is, you'll respond to it or you won't very fast, right? And it's like, that's kind of how I judge things. And, obviously this isn't for charity work. It's like if I was doing a not-for-profit work, then sure, you can just do things for the art of it. But I like to find the cross section between art and commerce. So it's got to be something that's artistic, but it has to be, if we're doing commercial work, it has to be something also that we think can, get people their money back and make some money, hopefully. Because I'm a firm believer in, like, if you can get people their investment back, they'll just keep investing over and over again. If you can get them a profit, it's a win. But if you start losing people money, they're not going to really be coming back. So I try to build that base of people who will support the work rather than just go through them, really quickly and never have them back again.
I've always admired that in you. You talk the talk and you walk the walk. You're still involved in independent theater. You will workshop something at a new plays festival. You'll make sure the art is great, but you're never going to pick something that people are going to say, well, no one wants to see it. You walk a very perfect line in terms of art and commerce, and I've always appreciated that.
Thank you.
Now I grew up on the Universal horror films, the old Draculas and Frankensteins, and I loved the British versions of them. Now you started apparently in the days of Halloween and whatever. There's so many subgenres now. Horror films are what's called elevated horror now, which I think is amazing because there's so many topics and there's so many ways of looking. Where do you classify Summoning the Spirit? What horror lovers need to go see your film?
I think it kind of covers it checks off a few different boxes. Like, I think there's a lot of suspense involved. I think there's psychological elements to it. Like when I write things, and I didn't write Summoning the Spirit, just to remind on that, but I did write Bard and I did write Red Light. And I think Summoning the Spirit falls into the category where there's some intelligence behind it, right? It's not like just some axe murder running around chopping people up. There's a psychology about it. There are deep characters. Like, you really get to know the people in all these different stories, and you get to relate to them. Whether or not you like them, that's a different story. But you can at least understand their motivations. There's clear, deep character development in each of them. So I think that people who like a real story, an unusual story, summoning the spirit, there's an element of heartbreak and relationships and all the difficulties that go along with those. And you learn a little bit about the people in this cult and why they're there, like what brings them there. And it's like, I think it's easy to judge on the surface, like, why are these people doing this? But after you learn a little bit about them, whether or not that would be your story, you could at least understand why maybe it's their story. So I think that these are films, something the spirit specifically, I think it's something that that a viewer would really enjoy learning about the elements, but also that's the suspense to it too. And also, Bigfoot's a very interesting character in it as well. Bigfoot is a deep character, and you learn about the motivations for this individual as well.
This film, when I was reading the description, in the back of my head, I got hints of American Horror Story, because their motif is to take so many different genres and to put it into one season. And yes, we have the Sasquatch legend in this, but we also have the concept of the cult. We have the concept of some form of mysticism within there. And yes, of course, the good old fashioned, look, we're in a cabin in the woods. What could go wrong? So you have all of those genres in there, which is wonderful, because you have a sense of community. You bring in so many audiences with something like this. So many people go, oh, I don't like vampires. And that's the end of a whole genre of films that they won't see. But you're basically saying, if you like this, come in. If you like this, come in. If you like this, you're bringing together a community, which is wonderful. I hear hints in this, parables of climate change and saving the environment. I'm hearing hints of the plight of the Native American, even if we look at it from a particular angle. I'm seeing a lot of, and like I say, I want to see what the reality is behind the nightmare. And I'm seeing so many stories where we're going to walk away from this film saying, oh, well, maybe I should think about this. Well, maybe they're right in that. And I always love ones where, and I'm glad you're hemming and hawing about the cult. I love ones where there's not the clear villain, if you will. And I like that a lot. That's great. We're talking about subgenres now. How has the horror film industry, the horror and sci-fi film industry, changed over the years that you've known it? Now, you've been right there because you're writing it. You're looking for its commercial value, if you will. How's it changed as time went on?
Well, I think that what's so interesting about horror is that it is such a popular genre. And what's interesting about the film industry in general is it's become so much, it's not an easy feat, so don't get me wrong with that, but it's become easier to create films. So now all of a sudden, you hear people about filming a big film on an iPhone or something like that. We didn't use an iPhone. We used like legitimate, really great camera equipment, obviously. But people can use that now. You don't have to have a big Hollywood crew and budget and all those things in order to make a film. So making films has become a lot more accessible, but I also think that it's become easier to make crummy films too, because the vetting process may not be there. If you were having a Hollywood studio doing it, they'd be like looking at the numbers, they'd be like, what's the subject? They can only do X amount of films a year, and there were only so many studios that could do it. But now you can have independent filmmakers making films every day. You can have this happen all the time. I mean, look at how quickly we did Summoning the Spirit. It was only several months from beginning to end once we had the screenplay done. So I think that in general has really made it so there can be so much more content. I mean, I think that we're living in an era where we're just so spoiled for content. But speaking of horror specifically, I think that people want, because we've moved away from, you were talking about like the vampires and Frankenstein and all those types of things. Like we've moved away from those archetypal characters, and then we moved on to people like a Michael Myers and a Jason and those folks who got me into loving horror. And then we move into a little bit more of intellectual things, right? Like Saw and all of those types of things, like puzzles involved, like there are much more complex characters behind the evil, and you find out what they're about, right? It's not just some deranged lunatic like going and killing people. It's why are you doing this? What's wrong with you? What's gone on for you? So I think that we've gotten a little bit more intellectual in some situations, with horror. We still have, slasher movies, of course, but I think that because there's so much more content, we can have so many more types of films that appeal to different types of people. Like Something in the Spirit, for example. My mother would never watch Halloween. Like that would be the last thing in the whole world that she would want to watch. But I think she would enjoy Summoning the Spirit. She might close her eyes for a few moments during the show, but the story is such that it's compelling and it's a fully fleshed out story that there's enough in there to hold somebody's attention without just worrying about, going from one murder to the next. So I think that we've really delved a little bit deeper into the storytelling in a lot of cases with horror these days, and that's the kind of material that I like too.
I'm glad you mentioned in terms of personalities. I think you're right. We went from these unreal or impossibly to be real characters into things where we might nod and say so. Even as you're talking about the examining the slasher or the killer. Again, it almost is a parable of maybe what we're doing in horror movies. Maybe if we did it in reality to some of our children, maybe we wouldn't have school shooting. Maybe if we just paid attention to the reason behind something, it would be a different world. Talking reason, talking about personalities. Every monster when I was a kid was a white male, heterosexual, period. Now, thanks to Jordan Peele, there's an entire genre of African-American horror films and horror series. There are so many examples where the killer is now a woman. And this because you mentioned John Garcia, and I know he's known for this. LGBTQ horror. People are now looking at Nightmare on Elm Street 2 as an innovative work. Back then it was panned, but now it's looked at as something quite envelope pushing. Knowing what you know with John Garcia, what's the difference in something like an LGBTQ horror film? Is there anything different beyond what's obvious? Is there anything else that distinctifies it as a genre?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street too. They were doing everything very, very covert in that film, or at least they tried to be. But the interesting part is that back then the audiences, some people picked up on that it was LGBTQ, but a lot of people didn't. The mainstream audience just thought it was a crappy movie, but maybe it wasn't that crappy, but it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best film. But if you watch it now, it's totally a campy film, and the guy is a complete gay kid, right? And you watch it, but the audience didn't know that. It was interesting. It's like the idea of Liberace back in the day, all these people going, oh, he's just very artistic, he's not gay or anything like that, and people are like, of course he was gay. But the thing is, because gay people are so visible these days, we don't have to do a film that's specifically about gayness. It's like it could be gay people are in every part of the world. So the fact that we're doing a horror story, it's not about them being gay. It just happens to be about these two people who are gay. So, and it's their story. And it could be, a man and a woman, it could have been anybody, but it just so happens that these two people are gay. And that's Borrowed is that way. And The Red Light is that way. Something in the Spirit has elements of it, but it's not an overly LGBT film. But the other two for sure are. But when you see it, you'd be like, oh, this could happen with a man and a woman. It's just got to do with who these two characters are and why they're spending time together. So I think that because the audience is less shocked about gayness and more aware, and it's in everybody's kind of vision these days, we can do these things and it's not a real big deal. So I don't think there's anything different, to answer your question, about an LGBT horror film, except it just happens to be about that kind of subject matter and those folks. But yeah, I think it could be anything.
I noticed that when I watched Nope, and I watched I'm a devotee of Jordan Peele, and his films are really just excellent horror movies. And it just offers us like Lovecraft Country did. It offers us just another perspective, another voice, if you will. And you're right, there's no change, but for some reason we walk into this much freer because of it. To see one of his films, or to see a different kind of thriller where the woman is the killer as opposed to being killed, where yes, like you said, it's two men and that's all there is to it. really interesting. I'm really thrilled that horror has taken that level. It's become the term is elevated horror. And when you talk about something like Parasite, when you talk The Shape of Water, and when you're talking Everything Everywhere All at Once, you're really talking about a horror film, but you're talking about it with a great intellectual level. When I read up on Summoning the Spirit, I got that feeling also, that you're entering into this new paradigm of elevated horror, where we're going to learn something, where we accept the nightmare as the reason for our learning. It's somewhat like the Greek gods. When you look at the ancient Greek and Roman gods, they're all quite monstrous, but they're gods. And I think we're starting to see that now with the horror film. And it's wonderful that there are people like you and your teams that are contributing to this. So when can we see Summoning the Spirit? When can I go to a movie theater? When can I click on my Netflix and see it there? When can we see this?
Yeah, well, the good news about Summoning the Spirit is we've just started this process, because we're literally finishing the film like right now. So it's going to be premiering in the Miami Film Festival in early March. So it's going to be there. And if anybody is down there for the film festival, feel free. Anybody can go see it. And we're hoping that we'll sell out our first performance and maybe get another one or two. And then if all goes well there, maybe we'll have a run at a local theater down in that area. And then we'll do, whatever else makes sense in the film festival circuit. And then we'll see if our distributor can get it sold for us and out in the world. So that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a little while still before it's out there for public consumption, but it's on the road. I mean, it's done and ready to roll. So we've got a plan for it. It's just going to take a little time to roll it out.
So we, as they say, stay tuned. And your next film, you're looking for partners on this still?
Yes,
for the next one?
Absolutely. And that's one of the fun things about this, because we don't do films that are ridiculously expensive. It's all about being able to, with our distributor partner, he can tell us very carefully what we can spend on the film and what he would expect to sell it for. And he's invested in it, in all different ways. So he's got a lot of motivation to get it sold and out in the world and make a profit. And my motivation, I know my partners, all their motivations as well, is to keep building a team of people who'd like to be part of our projects. And I always want to get people their money back and a profit. And the way that this is built is that people will get their money back when it's sold. I mean, there's no guarantees in the world, but this is the model and this is the way it's specifically being designed. A lot of independent filmmakers are all excited and they do a film and they've got enough money to film it and they don't have enough money to finish it, or they've gone over budget, or they don't have a distributor, and they don't know if anybody will ever want to buy it, or if it'll ever get off of their disk drive. But we've got that all planned out on purpose. So the film is being finished. It's done. We raised the money for it. The distributor is on board. He knows what he can sell it for. And then our goal is just to be able to raise, a decent amount of money for each of these films, but within the parameters of what it is. And we want to do a slate of films this coming year and get these out into the world and get people their money back immediately, as fast as possible when it's sold, and to get a profit, and then to have it yield profits for years and years to come, because we're not even touching on the international markets, which are huge. There's a huge horror community and LGBT horror films in South America for sure. And we've got people in our team who are native Spanish speakers. Our people are, Cuban and just from various countries and Spanish speaking. So we already have ties to the Spanish speaking film world just because of our relationships. And everything we do is multicultural, and it leans into the Latin community as well. So it should appeal, we believe, at least from our experiences, it should appeal to people from lots of backgrounds and whatnot. So it really does make it a good sale for an international audience. So that's the goal. So we're always looking for new folks to come on board our projects. And, some people like to just put a small amount in and get a thank you. And some people like to come on as a co-producer and get a title on the film. So there are lots of ways to do it.
I'm nodding in excitement on this, because I'm hearing three things. Number one, you're not just saying, I'm doing a film, please give me money. you're saying, I have a team ready, we have everything in place, there's a distributor, there's everything. You're not investing in a film, you're investing in an entire your entire structure regarding this. So that's already wonderful. Number two, it sounds like you want return business. You're not saying, okay, give me money and I'll call you. No, it's you're looking for constant partners. So after this film, there is another Jim Kierstead classic and another and another and another, and then it's connected to Broadway, if you will. So there's a lot of opportunities to be quite lucrative in terms of your association.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's kind of what the goal is. And a lot of the people who come on board our projects are people, some of them did start as theater investors, and some of them started as film investors, and some like to go back and forth, and some like one or the other. There's no right or wrong formula, but what we do like to do is to, my main focus is to always get people their money back. This isn't a charity thing. This is about business, and it's about coming on board. And a lot of the folks, when they get their money back, they say, I'll put this in the next one. And then they keep getting residuals from the one. So they keep feeding the next projects, and then they keep getting returns on the previous project. So those don't go away just because they're released, right? That's the nice part about film. Theater is a little bit more like, if you're not running somewhere, you're not getting any money. But a film becomes this product, and it's passive after you've done it, and you just you sell it and you get it out there and you distribute it, and it's got all the territories, and you can get money on that for years and years and years to come. And that's what we like to do with our partners. And we're very transparent. There's always been this horrible stigma in like the film industry, especially Hollywood, where they always show that films don't make any money. And you're like, well, that's because they do their creative accounting and they take all the fees off the top, and then through the waterfall, the investors are like the last people to get any money back. But that's not the way we do it. It's more like a Broadway show, the way we finance. So everybody's a partner, everything's transparent, everybody sees accounting statements, and everybody, gets their money back at the same time. There's no preferential treatment here. And hopefully they'll get their more money over the years to come. So it ends up being a nice little investment and fun too. People have a much better fun investing in like theater and film than they do in the stock market usually.
Indeed. And that little shelf over your shoulder there shows that you're a worthy investment yourself, with your Tonys, your Emmys, all of your particular awards. When you touch something, whether it's on stage or film, it happens, and it happens profitably. So to be in your company is definitely a boon. So investors out there, this is where you can make money. Really impressive at that. Jim, my last question, and it's my fanboy question.
Yeah.
What's your favorite horror movie?
Oh, my favorite horror movie. I've got two favorite horror movies, and I'd be hard pressed to choose between them. But my first love was Halloween. So that movie remains like right at the top of my list. And I've always loved the Halloween series, some more than others, but I still love that lore. So Halloween is always near and dear to my heart. And the other film that was life-changing for me was Silence of the Lambs. That was my other absolute favorite movie. And in fact, that might not be just my favorite horror movie. That might be my favorite movie. So
there you go. And that answered my question. That's part of the answer you gave me before. It's obvious that you like the psychological threat. You like the elevated horror. You like it's horrific, not necessarily a horror film. It's just a horrific story to be told, and that's it. Jim, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. It's always a pleasure to follow your career and see what's going on there. When I first met you, I blinked because I thought, what's this Broadway producer doing in a rinky-dink little festival here off Broadway? But there you were, workshopping works at the same time that you were putting things on Broadway. At the same time, you were penning scripts and accepting Emmys. You're one to watch. You're one to watch, and that's all there is to it.
I appreciate that. I just love the art forms. I love to create the art. I love to help other people make the art, and I love to put good content out there for people to enjoy. So if I can do any of those things, and hopefully all of them, I'm a happy person.
And it looks like you're consistently a happy person. You're making other people happy too.
Thank you.
Summoning the Spirit. Keep looking for it. I'm sure we're going to start seeing a lot of news on it, and I'm sure it's going to hit the theaters, and I'm sure we're going to love it. And then anything that says Jim Kierstead on it, whether it's on Broadway in Hadestown or the carnivorous Sweeney Todd, or whether it's on film in any of these soon to be classics and examples of the genre, you know you're in for a treat. Jim, thank you so much. All the best with it, and here's to the future.
Thank you, Jay. It was great to visit with you and everybody today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Same here.